Some utility workers find a body. I was just shocked.
Jerry says no. Mindy doesn't have any enemies.
She had been meeting with contractors, was planning on remodeling her home.
He tied her with zip ties.
Forces Mindy into her car. There's an individual in dark clothing that gets out of the driver's seat.
He has a bandana pulled up. They had dated for a long time.
How dare you move on to someone else?
And now she's terrified.
We are kind of back to square one.
If we don't find her before it snows, we are not going to find her, possibly ever.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. Anchorage, Alaska's most populated city, in America's most northern state.
Anchorage is a very vibrant city.
Anchorage is kind of a place that once you live here, it's really hard to live elsewhere without missing the natural environment.
It's just stunningly beautiful.
But that beauty can hide a darker, more threatening side.
It's a remote place. It's so far from the lower 48 that no one's going to chase most criminals here. So we do have a very dangerous element.
On August 6th, 2007, a resident feels that danger and reaches out to police for help.
911, what is your emergency?
The frightened caller identifies herself as Jerry Yates. She hasn't heard from her friend, 52-year-old Mindy Schloss.
Jerry Yates is concerned because Mindy's been missing and out of touch for the past 2 days.
Mindy is a nurse practitioner.
She traveled to remote villages and brought care to the underserved communities in Alaska. Jerry had been asked by Mindy to take care of her cat while Mindy made a work trip up to Fairbanks. Jerry said she noticed that the door handle was a little bit loose. And she noticed that things just didn't look the way that they normally do in Mindy's house.
She noticed that there were some wine glasses on the counter, and Mindy usually wouldn't leave them like that.
Jerry said Mindy would never leave unpaid bills on the table.
She was worried there had likely been some kind of foul play.
Now police have to determine whether Jerry's fear is justified, and Pernew is assigned the case.
When I get to the residence, I meet with Jerry. I take a look around. Didn't look out of order to me at all when I was in the home. I don't see any sign that the home was forced into by anyone. And I don't see any sign of struggle.
And no sign that Mindy was robbed.
I look for anything that looks like it had been taken. Mindy has a lot of Alaskan artifacts. I notice all of those things are there. In my thinking, probably somebody didn't come in here to burglarize the home because all of these expensive items would be easily taken by somebody are still here.
But Jerry informs Detective Pernew that there is something significant missing. Mindy's car.
Jerry mentions Mindy's car is not in the garage. Mindy works in Fairbanks. She flies to Fairbanks from the Anchorage airport, and she always leaves her car in the garage and takes a taxi to the airport. She never takes the car.
And Jerry tells me Mindy didn't arrive for her scheduled work in Fairbanks, Alaska. I'm starting to think that something isn't quite right here. And Jerry showed me Mindy's bed. We see that the bed is made perfectly. It's got military corners on it. And she just said it was definitely not made by her friend.
It is so valuable to have a friend know their friend's habit and can easily pick on things that may be out of place or things that they wouldn't have done that investigators wouldn't know.
For police to determine anything out of the ordinary happened to Mindy, they first need to learn what Mindy's ordinary life looked like while living alone in Anchorage.
Mindy Schloss is somebody who lived in Alaska for a long time. She moved to Alaska in 1980 from Syracuse, New York.
She was a kind, caring, compassionate, responsible member of society. She worked her entire career as a public health nurse.
The Alaska wilderness was like heaven for her. She loved to pick berries and make pies.
Given Mindy's love of the forest and the vast wilderness, perhaps she ventured into unfamiliar territory and couldn't find her way out.
I'm thinking possibly Mindy had gotten into her car and gone out in the woods berry picking, and maybe she got lost, maybe she got hurt.
Jerry comes up with some pictures of Mindy.
And looking at pictures, I see that Mindy has a unique necklace, and she also has a gold watch on her wrist.
Anchorage police declare Mindy Schloss a missing person and distribute pictures of her and her vehicle. Teams search for her in the surrounding woods and keep an eye out for her vehicle, which she may have left at a trailhead.
And
Teams are very experienced at finding lost hikers, and since Mindy's been missing for just 2 days, their chances are still high of finding her alive. Back at Mindy's house, detectives try to track Mindy's whereabouts by other means.
I wanted to find Mindy's bank information because I know from previous investigations that that is one way to easily track a victim.
So we are trying to find Mindy's purse. Maybe her purse is at home.
Police don't find it, but they do find a stash of Mindy's old purses and wallets.
In one purse, there was a wallet that was empty, except for a small piece of paper that had 4 numbers on it.
It looks like it's a PIN number for a bank card, for a credit card.
I made a note of that PIN number and held on to the piece of paper as evidence.
With this information, Detective Pernew and her team will attempt to piece together Mindy's whereabouts in the lead-up to her disappearance.
We know that Mindy went missing sometime between August 4th and August 7th. Mindy was supposed to leave Anchorage on August 6th, arrive in Fairbanks, and start seeing patients on August 7th. So, with the information about Mindy's bank account, we do a bank trace.
It shows a $500 withdrawal from Mindy's account on August the 5th. And then on August 6th, another $500 is withdrawn from Mindy's account from a different ATM.
What's unusual is that both withdrawals happen very early in the morning. That's very out of habit for her.
Both withdrawals are within several miles of Mindy's home. So the question is, did Mindy make those withdrawals, or did someone else?
We talked to the bank where the withdrawals were made, and we were able to get video of the person that was using Mindy's ATM card.
And that person is clearly not Mindy.
We see a man who looks to be in his 20s.
He looked like he had a muscular build. He was average height.
In a black puffy jacket with a ball cap and a bandana around his face.
We see him go into the ATM area and then uses Mindy's card to make a $500 withdrawal from her account, which was the maximum that could be withdrawn, and leaves.
The ATM video leads detectives to one terrifying conclusion.
Mindy has been robbed and probably murdered for her money.
Detectives believe this man is likely responsible. But who is he?
We obtain the evidence, the video from the second ATM. We see the same man, dressed the same, arriving at the ATM on a bike. He's also wearing a backpack. But at one point...
And when he pulls the bandana back up, we see that there's a small tattoo on his finger.
Whoever this masked man is, he may have kidnapped Mindy from her home.
Now we know that we have to go back to Mindy's house. We have to treat it as a possible crime scene, and we have to thoroughly process it for any evidence.
When we're searching the residence, there's really not much evidence there. There's no sign of a cleanup, there's no blood, there's no sign of a struggle. We do find a pubic hair lifted from the carpet in the living room of Mindy's home.
We also find the pubic hair in the bedroom next to Mindy's bed.
The lab reveals that the hairs were not from Mindy, but from a Caucasian man. Could it be from the same man with the tattoo captured on bank cameras? And that's not all the team finds in Mindy's bedroom.
One of the things that we see are zip ties on the floor.
Those are oftentimes used to restrain people when somebody's committing a crime.
Detective Pernew now suspects the perpetrator likely tied Mindy up and then killed her elsewhere. Investigators know that most murders are committed by someone known to the victim.
Mindy has no family that lives in Anchorage. They all live out of state. So I go back to Mindy's friend, Jerry, and I ask her if there is anybody that she can think of that would want to hurt Mindy.
And Jerry says no. Mindy doesn't have any enemies. But Jerry suggested that we should talk to Mindy's on-again, off-again ex-boyfriend.
A man named Bob Conway.
Jerry told me that recently Mindy had broken the relationship off and had started dating new people.
Detective Pernew now wonders, is it possible that Mindy's ex-boyfriend Bob was triggered by jealousy?
That could be something that is extremely aggravating to him. Like, how dare you move on to someone else?
We have to consider Bob as a suspect.
Nurse practitioner Mindy Schloss has been missing from her Anchorage, Alaska home for 3 days and feared dead. Detectives believe someone close to her may be responsible. Her ex-boyfriend, Bob Conway.
Recent exes are always prime suspects.
When I talked to Bob and asked him about his relationship with Mindy, he tells me that they did have a long-standing relationship, and recently Mindy had broken the relationship off.
Bob says that he certainly still adores Mindy. He'd love to have her back, but he would never hurt her.
Bob also claims he has a solid alibi.
Bob claims that at the time that Mindy disappeared, he was in Juneau, Alaska, working, which is hundreds of miles away from Anchorage.
But was Bob actually there when
The employer showed that he was actually in Juneau.
We also able to check the hotel where he stayed, and everything checks out. We know that he could not have been involved in Mindy's disappearance.
So at this point, Bob is no longer a suspect.
With Mindy's ex-boyfriend ruled out, the team canvasses Mindy's neighbors for possible new leads.
The Jewel Lake area is inhabited by a variety of people. As we talk to them, we realize that it's normally a nice and quiet, peaceful neighborhood where people have lived for many years.
That is, until the occupants of a house right beside Mindy's moved in.
The home is known as the Party House, and we find out that there was a large party at the home on August 3rd.
That's the same night Mindy Schloss likely went missing.
Witnesses indicate that there was about 25 to 50 people that were coming and going all hours of the night.
Every neighbor complained about that party.
Since Mindy lived right next door, maybe she confronted drunk residents in the wee hours to shut it down, and the exchange at the party house turned ugly.
I go up to the house, and I knock. Nobody answers. I look in the windows. Nobody answers. So I go to the house that is next to the party house. I knock on the door.
And the door is opened by a woman, Kathy.
It's obvious that she's uneasy. She keeps looking around. She tells me, no, I really don't know the people that live there. You know, I have to go to work. I'm kind of running late. Seems as if she wants me to go away. She just doesn't want to talk to me anymore. But I give her my business card and tell her if she thinks of anything else to please give me a call.
With no leads from Mindy's neighbors on her disappearance, investigators sift through paperwork they collected the day before from Mindy's home.
We know from searching her house that Mindy was looking for contractors to do some work around her house.
One of the contractors met with Mindy at her home on August 3rd.
The same day as the party, when police suspect Mindy went missing.
The contractor may be the last person who had seen Mindy before her disappearance.
That's a big break in the case. So we know that we have to find out more about him. He worked for Mindy's friend Susan and was contacted by Mindy through Susan.
Detectives reach out to Susan to find out what she might know about the contractor's meeting with Mindy.
Susan tells us that Mindy complained to her that he gave her an outrageous quote, and they argued about it, and even called her. More than that, after he left a threatening note on her door, and that upset Mindy.
Is it possible the contractor's verbal assaults escalated?
Knowledge of the occupants' routines, and perhaps even access to the home, a garage code, a house key.
So police would want to look into this contractor and his background.
We ran a criminal history check on this contractor, and sure enough, there are a number of criminal convictions. He has a history of assaultive behavior. So now all kinds of alarm bells are ringing.
Detectives want to hear the story this abusive ex-con contractor has to tell.
That contractor tells us that he met with Mindy on August 3rd, just before her disappearance.
This contractor says that he believes Mindy was trying to lowball him. He confirms they actually got into an argument and he was upset, but denies that he did anything to her.
But detectives need to be sure, and they have one way to find out.
Mindy's house, we found pubic hair in the bedroom next to Mindy's bed.
He was asked for a DNA sample, and he provided it without a problem.
That DNA sample is processed, there is no match. And then he gives us an alibi, we check his alibi, and it all checks out.
Police have no choice but to eliminate the contractor as a potential suspect.
We are ready to just let him go and forget about him. But we learn that he has a son, and that son was with him when he was visiting Mindy. He's a young man in his early 20s.
Detectives get a photo of the young man and compare it to the man seen stealing Mindy's money in the ATM video.
And we think that he may match the photos of the person that we see in the ATM videos. He's also a tall young man who appeared to be well built, a Caucasian male, just like the person in the photos.
Police bring him in to supply a DNA sample to compare with the male DNA found in Mindy's house. When investigators get the results back from the lab, they find there is no match.
And he has an alibi.
Detectives rule out the contractor's son as a suspect.
Now we are back to square one.
But on August 9th, 5 days after Mindy goes missing, police get a big break in the case.
A person has found Mindy's car at the Anchorage International Airport.
Could this mean that Mindy Schloss made it to Fairbanks on her business trip after all?
The vast majority of missing persons return unharmed.
As we are heading to the parking lot, we are thinking about all the possibilities. Did Mindy go out of town?
Detective Pernew is less optimistic.
But I just know that we're actually going to find Mindy in the trunk of her car.
In Anchorage, Alaska, 52-year-old Mindy Schloss has been missing for 5 days when detectives respond to a call about her vehicle.
Mindy's car was found at the Anchorage airport.
We go to the parking lot. It's parked not in regular parking like somebody would take a flight to the airport, but in a place that provides food for the airlines.
It's all very suspicious.
She's not in her car.
There's a shovel in the trunk.
And we find a suitcase and items for travel inside the suitcase.
We find Mindy's purse in the suitcase, and the wallet and the cell phone are missing.
In Mindy's car, investigators also find her computer. Police technicians determine the last time Mindy logged on.
In the evening of August the 3rd, she's browsing nursing websites looking for some information about her work. She's on the computer until 11:30 that evening.
As police suspected, Mindy was likely abducted shortly after that, on August 4th, and her car has still more to reveal.
We can see a shoe impression, as if somebody was laying in the back seat of the car and their feet were pressed up against the side wall just below the window.
The size of the footprint suggests that it's left by a woman.
Detectives suspect that woman was Mindy, who was likely restrained and lying on her back. But what police discover next is even more grim.
We find what looks like some blood in the back of the car on the floor mat. We carefully process it for DNA. It's Mindy's.
Mindy is still missing, but she was bound and bleeding in the back seat of her car.
At this point, we become extremely concerned. It's not just that she was missing.
Mindy was probably dead.
Now detectives need to figure out who left Mindy's car at the airport.
We have to check for any surveillance video. And we get access to the CCTV.
Mindy's red sedan arrives at the airport on August 4th at 12:45 p.m. But she's not in it.
The surveillance video shows the vehicle pulling into the parking lot and parking near the building. Then we can see that there's an individual that gets out of the driver's seat.
That person appears to be a white male. He's wearing a short-sleeved dark shirt. He's also wearing a backpack.
The man exiting Mindy's car has the same backpack and skin tone as the man in the ATM videos.
We are certain that the suspect is
We are frustrated because the video is too grainy to make an identification.
Police process the vehicle for prints, but find none.
Before leaving, he carefully wipes the door handle of the car.
This individual is trying to cover his tracks.
Without fingerprints or DNA of the man in the videos, detectives have no way to identify him. But investigators think of another way to find his name.
We find out in the evening of August 3rd, she is visited by one of the contractors to discuss the remodeling of her home.
And that's not all they find out.
He goes by the name Tiger Chase.
This guy is a serious criminal.
He is a Hells Angels member.
He has a long criminal history, including assault.
Detectives also discover that Tiger Chase is ex-military.
The way that Mindy Schloss's bed was made was with military-style precision.
Could Chase be the one who made Mindy's bed, withdrew her money, then left her car at the airport, all to conceal his abduction, theft, murder, and disposal of Mindy Schloss?
There is a possibility that this could be our guy.
5 days after Mindy Schloss went missing in Anchorage, Alaska, police pick up a Hells Angels ex-con named Tiger Chase. Chase met Mindy about contracting work the day before she went missing.
This guy comes in and we see that he's covered in tattoos.
We were looking for an individual with a tattoo that we saw in the ATM video.
We ask him about his contact with Mindy, and he tells us that he did in fact meet Mindy, and he never heard from her again.
But is he telling the truth?
He provides us with a DNA sample without any problems, and eventually we are able to run that DNA sample against the pubic hair that we found in Mindy's house, and there's no match. We can safely eliminate him as our suspect.
With Chase ruled out, investigators have run out of leads.
We talk to the contractors, we talk to the ex-boyfriend, all the leads are exhausted.
And after several days of searching, police have also failed to find any trace of Mindy in the woods near her home, or anywhere else.
With each passing hour or day, the likelihood of recovering the body and any evidence to go with it becomes increasingly unlikely.
But 6 days after Mindy's disappearance, Detective Pernew gets a promising lead.
I get a call from Kathy, the woman that I gave my business card to, the neighbor next to the party house that seemed to be really uncomfortable talking to me.
She was afraid of a young man who lives next door.
His first name is Josh.
He told her not to talk to the police.
Josh lived in the party house between Kathy and Mindy. Kathy now believes Josh may have harmed Mindy because he's been threatening Kathy too.
This is a huge lead for us. This is something that we have to follow up immediately.
Terrified of her young neighbor's threats, she sits down to tell the detective everything she knows about Josh. Detective Pernew records the conversation.
Kathy tells me that just before I knocked on the door of her home, Josh, from next door at the party house, comes over to her house.
He said, "Hey, I see the police walking around in the neighborhood. I'd appreciate it if you didn't say anything about me staying next door."
Kathy also tells us the day she talked to us, she actually could see Josh looking at her from his bedroom window.
He was over on the window watching me talk to you guys, and I just felt really weird.
And that's why she got rid of us as quick as possible.
After you guys left, just a couple minutes later, he came back over to the house and said a couple more things about, not saying anything. I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, I have a warrant out for my arrest."
She asked him, what was that warrant for? And he told her it was for robbing a drug dealer. And he just didn't want the police to know he was there because he knew that he would get arrested. She also told me that later that evening, she could hear somebody walking something on the porch.
I heard something on the porch. I was like, this is weird.
Initially, she thinks it's her roommate, but then as she looks out, she sees Josh pacing on her front porch. And now she's terrified.
That is what prompted her to give us a call, because she knew that she could be in danger.
Detective Pernew asked Kathy to tell her more of what she knows about Josh.
I've only talked to that Josh kid a couple of times.
Kathy doesn't know much about Josh. She doesn't know his last name.
He's just kind of weird. He comes across really cocky and just really proud of himself. He makes me feel uncomfortable.
But Kathy gives us a good description of Josh.
Maybe 5'10" or so.
Okay.
Kind of like, I mean, he's an okay-looking guy, like tan-skinned, kind of spiky hair.
More importantly, Kathy noticed that Josh has tattoos on his hands.
Kathy's description of Josh could very well match that of the person in the surveillance footage from the ATM.
We know we have to find Josh. So we set up surveillance on the party house.
We take notes about who's coming and going.
If he lives there, his name could be on that lease agreement.
Detectives obtained the lease from the owner.
And there is no Josh on the lease. Only Shane, the son of the property owner. So we talked to Shane.
He confirms he lives in the house with 2 roommates and the guy whose name is Josh. Shane also volunteers that Josh is kind of intimidating. He even says that at one point Josh pointed a gun at him. There is no doubt in our minds that he's our suspect.
Detectives asked Shane Josh's last name.
Unfortunately, he doesn't know Josh's last name, but his friend Jenna might.
Jenna tells us that his name is Joshua Wade.
When we hear the name Joshua Wade, our jaws drop to the table.
It turns out Joshua Wade has no pending arrest warrants, but he does have serious priors.
He had been arrested and charged with the murder of Della Brown. Although he was acquitted of the murder, he was convicted of evidence tampering.
While Wade has no warrants out for his arrest, he's an ex-convict and only recently released.
Josh Wade served 6.5 years in prison, and he'd only been out about 6 months when Mindy Schloss disappeared.
Joshua Wade is now the prime suspect in Mindy's disappearance and likely her murder.
A person with such a violent history living next door to Mindy Schloss, it's too much of a coincidence.
Two weeks after Mindy Schloss was abducted, detectives have finally identified a prime suspect. Her next-door neighbor and ex-con, Joshua Wade.
But there's no evidence that concretely places him with Mindy.
So police in Anchorage reach out to the FBI for help.
The FBI come with an idea about scent detection dogs. They tell me that the dogs can follow the scent of a person up to an unknown amount of time.
We believe the suspect used Mindy's debit card to withdraw cash from ATMs. We know that the suspect drove Mindy's car to the parking lot near the airport. If we can connect these locations with the location where the suspect lives, we would have enough for the search warrant.
Detectives hope the canines can sniff out the evidence they need.
They were given the scent from Mindy's vehicle.
The dogs are then introduced to that scent at the ATM.
And then the first dog tracks the scent to Mindy's home, goes up to the front door, comes back to the party house property, goes around the fence, doesn't go up to the front door of the party house, but goes to the side door, which is used by all the residents, and sits down and indicates that's where the scent stops. And I was just shocked. Then the second dog does the exact same thing as the first dog. What's amazing is the second ATM is quite far from the party house, and the dog makes its way back from that second ATM.
Based on the canine's identification, detectives can now obtain a warrant to search Josh Wade's home.
Josh Wade is not home, but we do search his room.
The window from Josh's room has a perfect view to Mindy's house.
It's a perfect spot for him to watch her routine and to scope out what she does on a daily basis.
That's not the only thing in the room that strikes detectives.
One of the things that we note immediately is that Wade's bed is neatly made. It's almost like in the military, just like Mindy's bed.
We also find a pack of black zip ties. Forensics tells us that these are the same zip ties that we found in Mindy's house.
Police find more damning evidence.
The puffy coat that looked like the one that was worn in the ATM video. And inside the pocket of that jacket, we find the ATM receipt where he withdrew the money from Mindy's bank account.
They also find a gold watch hidden in Josh's closet.
It looks to be the same watch that Mindy is wearing in the photographs that we were given.
Killers will keep a keepsake of the victim as a trophy, a symbol of what they've done, and perhaps the fantasy that they've had about them.
With all the evidence collected, detectives have enough to charge Josh Wade for theft. But police have no idea where he is, so they ask the public for help.
Josh Wade's photo was released to the public.
Everybody in town knows the police are looking for Josh Wade.
The strategy works. A young woman comes forward, claiming she knows Josh.
She indicates that he has been getting rides from her. In fact, he's been sleeping in her car.
He even left his backpack in her car.
It's the same backpack the masked suspect is carrying in the ATM videos.
We search the backpack and we locate a locked phone that we believe to be Josh Wade's.
While police technicians attempt to unlock the phone, Josh's female friend offers to help authorities apprehend him.
The young woman tells us that she sees him near an apartment building.
The Anchorage SWAT team springs into action. But when they arrive, Joshua Wade sees them, flees into the apartment building, and takes a young woman hostage.
The life of the hostage is in Wade's hands, and the SWAT team tries to negotiate with him. We even bring Wade's dad to help us persuade Wade to give up.
Negotiations. Joshua Wade agrees to let the hostage go and surrender to police.
We take him into custody and bring him to the police station.
First, they want to document a uniquely identifying mark.
We ask him to raise his hand over his face, and it's at that point that we can see the tattoo on his hand, and the tattoo matches the man in the ATM video.
Detectives now have hard evidence that proves Josh stole Mindy's money and watch. But he won't reveal anything else.
He's being extremely cocky, arrogant.
Do you want to talk with us?
About what? I have no idea what I've been arrested for, man.
He refuses to talk. He's not giving us any information.
Police can't charge Josh for abduction or murder without a body, so detectives try to provoke a confession.
We tell him that he's under arrest for bank fraud or using Mindy Schloss's ATM card.
And we say, we actually spoke to Mindy, and she told us that she did not give you permission to use it.
We actually talked to Mindy, you know.
What did you say?
They say we talked to Mindy.
And he just looks and smirks.
You guys trying to play games with me, man?
That conversation left no doubt in my mind that he was responsible for what happened to her. Because obviously he knew that we couldn't speak to Mindy.
Josh's reaction confirms detective suspicions about Mindy's fate, but they still don't have enough to charge him with murder, and time is not on their side.
It's getting close to the time where it's going to snow in Alaska, and if we don't find her before it snows, we are not going to find her, possibly ever.
Just when it looks like Josh may get away with murder, investigators receive promising news.
Some utility workers find a body that is possibly Mindy Schloss's body.
The remains are located in a forest, a few miles from Josh and Mindy's street.
I go to the location, and I see remains of a person. The body is decayed, and it looks like it's been partially burned. And we can see that the hands are bound with black zip ties. We check the manufacturer number on the zip ties and find that it's the same type of zip tie we found at Josh's house and in Mindy's bedroom.
They also spot an item that helps to identify the victim before DNA corroborates it.
We see something shiny on the remains, and turns out that it's a necklace around the victim's neck. We recognize the necklace as the same one that we can see in the photos of Mindy.
Between the necklace and the zip ties, I am sure that this is Mindy Schloss.
Police also
we find a bullet hole in the back of the skull.
And there is a shell casing from a Glock 45 found near the body.
Ultimately, investigators get one last piece to the puzzle that enables them to charge the man responsible.
We are able to unlock Wade's phone, and sure enough, we find a photo and it shows Joshua Wade holding a Glock 45 handgun.
Detectives can now finally piece together the last 24 hours of Mindy Schloss's life.
On August 3rd, in the evening, Mindy talks with Tiger Chase at her residence about working on her home. Later that night, Mindy is looking on the internet about nursing until around 11:30 at night, when she logs off.
On August 4th, about 1:30 a.m., Josh Wade enters Mindy Schloss's house
and accosts Mindy in her bedroom with a gun.
I think he sexually assaulted her.
He tied her with zip ties and got her to tell him her PIN number.
Wade then forces Mindy into her car, where then he drives her to a cul-de-sac.
Wade removes the restraints for Mindy's legs and forces her to walk into the woods.
He walked her in there, and then he told her to kneel down so he could cut the zip ties off of her wrist, and then shot her in the back of the head.
And then he tries to burn the body.
At 4 a.m., Wade returns to Mindy's house, cleans up, makes her bed, and leaves.
At 12:45 p.m., Wade drives Mindy's car to the airport and leaves it there. On August 5th, Wade drives to an ATM where he uses Mindy's card to make a $500 withdrawal.
On August the 6th, Wade uses Mindy's card to withdraw $500 from her account from a different ATM.
Josh Wade faces the death penalty for the abduction and killing of Mindy Schloss.
And in order to avoid it, he strikes a deal. And in that deal, he confesses to killing Mindy Schloss and admits to killing Della Brown.
Joshua Wade is sentenced to 99 years in prison.
He's never going to leave jail again, so justice was served. But that will never bring Mindy back.
It's just a terrible, sad situation where somebody who helped society and did such incredible things was taken way too soon.